Today we are interviewing Marlene Stieber and her sister Sue Hubert. Thank you both for sharing your story with the town. We're hoping to preserve your history by this conversation. As you know, the museum has lots of information about your family, but I just kind of like for you to share and put the pieces together for myself and for others who are going to hear this interview and see the interview. So we will just start there with however you want to start with your great grandparents were the first here, if I'm not mistaken, and just kind of walk us through that process, through your family history.
Okay. W.G. Winburn was the first one here, if I got the right initial.
That was on the Burge side, on our mother's side.
He came in 1850s, kind of get away from the war, or the uprising
Civil War.
back east, and they were also looking just for a better place to live. He looked around and went back to Georgia, and got everything together, and he and his wife got to the Fort Lupton area in 1861, I think. And I have to throw this in, and I have been told that it was proper at that time, so I'm being proper now. They had a freed slave that had no family, and he came with them. So we had Negro John, and that's what I asked, what I was supposed to call him. Well, I have no idea what his last name was. We have no idea where he's buried, but he was part of the family, and he came with them. And they settled several different houses right across the Platte River on
that first hill that you see when you go out of town.
When you go up the hill.
It's called Burgess Hill. So that was the Burge side of the family. And then the Davises came.
William Henry Davis came. The poor young man was on his way to California. He was going to get rich. And I don't remember the year, but the easiest way and the laziest way is he came across lower Chicago during the Chicago fire. So whatever year the fire was is when W.H. came through. Anyway, he stopped in Denver. He was out of money, and he got a job driving a milk truck. And the first day out, he had an accident and broke a leg, and he went one of the few doctors in town, and there wasn't a hospital, so he's the doctor. He had no family or anybody. And the doctor offered to let him stay with them while he healed. And I don't know whether we're real sure or not, but the doctor's niece or daughter, and the two of them
Annie Sopris
kind of fell in love. And so that worked out really well, because then W.H. stayed in Denver. And his first wife was Ada.
Ada Sopris. There's a mountain named after her family.
Was the first wife. And she died, she and the baby died in childbirth. So after a couple of years, he sent a letter back east to Cecilia Bennett, who he had gone to school with, and wanted to know if she'd be interested in coming to Colorado and being his wife. Well, obviously I guess it's not obvious, but yes it is. She came to Colorado and brought trunks full of beautiful china and linens and etc. And Celia and W.H. stayed in Denver and had two children, our grandfather, Ernest Bennett, and they had a daughter, Ada. And W.H. kind of twisted her arm, I think, in naming their daughter Ada after his first wife. And Celia, so we've been told, was kind of always a little bit upset. And I thought, if I was named after my husband's first wife. I don't know whether I'd be too happy either. But anyway, they lived in Denver. And WH scouted around and bought property in Fort Lupton. And he also set out, I don't know how many, whether anybody ever took count of how many cottonwood trees he planted. But we do have, not notification, it's publicized that he did send a train car full of cottonwood trees that are, and I haven't been to Wyoming, Cheyenne lately,
Cheyenne.
around the capital, but the last time I was there, some of the cotton trees were still,
Still
they
there.
were planted around there, and there's a lot in Fort Lupton. Anyway, he had strawberry patch south of, what's Davis Lane, 10, 12, 12.
Eight.
South of 12 along the old road to Brighton.
10.
Hmm?
10. Isn't it? 8, 10.
And Ernie,
10.
people came out from, it was a large enough strawberry patch that people from Denver came out on the train, picked berries, and went home that day. And who ended up to be our Grandpa Davis, Ernie, was out in the field one day, and our grandmother, who was Ruby Frink, had her eye on him, and she picked up a snake and twirled it around and threw it, and that immediately got his attention. And he decided maybe he should check into this association. So that began a beautiful friendship, and then Ruby went back to New York to visit relatives, and one of her friends said, somebody else has got their eye on Ernie, you better come home, and she did.
Yeah,
And-
we saw that in a letter.
How fun.
That
Yeah.
took care of that.
Took care of that.
Old-fashioned dating out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you want to switch to?
So then they had the farm on it's Road 10, and the house is still there. They built the house with the strawberry money. So it was a pretty neat looking house. We have a lot of good memories there. Grandma and Grandpa had, they had a couple stillbirths, and then they had Billy, and he died when he was about 6 years old.
A little older,
6
right
or
in there
8
somewhere.
maybe.
Measles.
With the measles. And then they had my dad and Marlene's dad, Jack. And then they had Lois and Nancy and Larry. So the 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. And they were always a very patriotic family, and Grandpa got a lot of awards, the Skilly Award for farming. They raised cows, but he farmed a lot, belonged to all the different farming groups, and was quite well known for his techniques in farming. And Grandma was a very, very loving woman, wonderful cook, and
Grandpa called her nosy.
if there was somebody new in the neighborhood, she was the first one there with food and to welcome into the neighborhood. And then she had beautiful flowers, also iris and dahlias, just gorgeous. And they had a black raspberry patch. And what? I don't know. We'll jump to.
That was Grandma, right?
Grandma Davis. She was Mother of the Year, Colorado. You probably have that in some of the scrapbooks. Ruby was her name. She and
Ruby
Daisy
Frank
were sisters.
Davis.
Uh-huh.
She's right there. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. She and Aunt Daisy were sisters. When they grew up, they were quite extraordinary sisters. You probably have some of those stories in the Frink book. They ran the Fort Lupton Press. They raised corn out east of town. They did all kinds of things. They rode horses. Aunt Daisy was a game warden over up around Larkspur.
Oh, wow.
We have pictures of both of them riding with their rifles and up in the hills around there. Yeah, they were extraordinary women. They really were. Did a lot. Aunt Daisy was the one who ended up running the Fort Lupton Canning Company. And so she had her family, and they lived in Brighton. She married a counter, and that's where the counter name comes in.
Grandpa Davis during World War I was,
Yes.
I don't know whether it was his size, I think that had something to do with it. I don't think Sue and I ever realized we grew up with him, and I don't think, he maybe was 5'8". He was small, but this was Grandpa, and we didn't ever think about him being smaller than his sons and etc.
Yeah.
But anyway, World War I, he didn't qualify for the draft. So anyone in Fort Lupton, any man that wanted to go to Denver to register to go in the service, Grandpa took them. And if they were inducted, he took them back the day they left. And Grandma sent them a box the whole time they were overseas. And when they came home, Grandpa went back to Denver and brought them home. And they always had, like Sue said, both of them were very patriotic. There was always, and I don't know, neither one of you see stars in the windows anymore. And they were, I don't remember now, white on blue or blue, I think white on blue. And if it was a deceased veteran, it was a different color.
Mm-hmm.
But and of course well, by the time World War II, our dad, Aunt Lois, her husband, Uncle Bud, were all in the service, so she had all these flags in the window that faced the mountains. And whether we liked it or not, on Sunday afternoons, and it really, when you're a teenager and you have other things you want to do, and I don't know what it was, but Grandma wrote letters, and anybody that was in the house had to write
a letter.
at least a paragraph
Mhm.
to anybody that she was writing to. And, it didn't hurt us at all, but, we thought it was I don't know.
Sure.
But anyway.
So
What-
Grandpa during the First World War, he rounded up wild horses too for Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. Took them down to Texas. And so we have a lot of pictures of him as a cowboy. Yeah, that's pretty
wow.
cool.
He also bought teams of, and I don't know whether, I think it was mules, but every spring he'd buy them and train them and then take them back to Denver, and that's how he made part of his money after they were married. But when they lived out there, he just trained teams and got them settled in and took them back to Denver. And there's a lovely story. Okay, back up. W.H. married Celia Bennett.
Mhm.
It took me a long time to figure out why we had Bennett relatives in Wyoming
Mhm.
before I ever found out what the connection was. And up towards Medicine Bow, the Bennett side had, I don't know how many,
Oh, hundreds.
hundreds of acres. But anyway, Ernie would go up and visit. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think it was after they were married. But he'd go up and he was as strong as an ox for the size he was. And there's one story too when he appeared and he knew all the Bennetts were at not the meeting house, but the gathering where he knew when he got to town where they would all be. And he went in and one of the locals said something, an expletive, that damn guy from Colorado's here again, what's he doing here? He has no business. Anyway, Grandpa cleaned plows. And nobody ever said anything about that damn Colorado rancher being here again. Oh, anyway, he made a point.
It was tough. They were both tough.
Had to be.
Yeah, we have Grandma Ruby's diaries, and so they're quite interesting to read. And she cooked a lot every weekend for a crew of people. A lot of people. They must have raised turkeys because lots of times it was a turkey. So
Interesting.
yeah. I remember when they had rabbits
Mhm.
and chickens.
Uncle Larry had rabbits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so her mother and father were the Franks that came and started the Fort Lupton Canning Company. And they had a big house there where the
Post office.
post office is now. It was a big house. And they had a separate in the back, they had like a separate kitchen. And when you went in the house, it was always dark. They had huge, big drapes. That's what I remember on the walls, like velvet drapes.
Yes.
Probably to keep the heat out. I don't know now, you know. I don't remember being hot in there, so that must have been why. But anyway, in the back, they had, we would have family picnics there. And they'd always take family pictures. And I'm not in them because they always had dry ice and ice cream. And I was back there playing with the dry ice. They always tease me about that. You're not in any of the pictures.
So I have a question with that story and talking about that. The Franks is the family that started Tomato Days. Is that correct? Yeah. I've been doing research on that. So it was a party, it sounded like, that they wanted to do for their
employees.
employees.
And the whole town.
Well, and
And
actually the town, yeah.
Yeah.
And the one year that they did it was an extremely profitable year for tomatoes.
Gotcha.
And they had extras.
Yeah.
So it worked very well. And somewhere in your writing, I've got it written down, it told how many pounds of this and this and this, and how many pumpkin
yes,
pies,
we
and
do
how many
have that.
rolls.
To
And
cook.
fed the whole town. The governor was here. I'm not
Mhm.
sure who else, but it's in.
We've got that
It's in there
somewhere.
somewhere.
1908
Okay. That was in the early 1900s, yeah.
was the first one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was 04, but that's all right.
Was it?
I wasn't
04?
here, so I don't
I
remember.
don't know. Everything I'm seeing is 1908.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They had a dance contest that night,
Mm-hmm.
and Ernie and Ruby won the dance contest.
Oh, how fun.
When Sue talked about them, Ruby and Daisy working at the Fort Lupton Press, Grandma Frank purchased the Fort Lupton Press to keep them busy. Aunt Daisy was very, very staunch Republican, and Grandma Davis was even staunchier Democrat. But they did a beautiful job, and there were no complaints with the Fort Lupton Press because they both kept their sides and
Had their opinions.
kept peace. worked beautiful.
Interesting.
And then Grandma Frank also bought the Star Theater.
Yes. Back to the Burges, the first ones we talked about. Our grandfather Burge was involved a lot in the Methodist Church, and he's one of the men that when they first built the one on Park Avenue, 306 Park, he's one of the men that was involved in that. And then Grandma Frank and her husband were also involved with the building of that church. So that's kind of cool to think of that they both were there. Our mom, it was built in 1916, the one on Park Avenue. The old one is where the old mortuary used to be on Denver Avenue and 9th Avenue. That used to be the First Methodist Church. It was donated by the railroad. The railroad donated that property for them to build a church. And so the ladies of that church, at the Methodist Church then, they would serve the railmen every Wednesday. They'd serve them lunch. And the train would always stop there, and everybody on the train would get to have lunch. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So they kind of outgrew that, and so they decided to build a new one that was right during 1916 is when it finished. So the First World War was starting to rev up, but they got it finished. And our mother was born in May of 1916. So she was the first baby baptized on August the 16th, 1916, in that church. Yeah, that was kind of a cool thing.
That is very cool.
Yeah, and they were very active in it. Our grandmother Burge was very active. They had a farm just across the river, and
Still there.
it's still there, but it's the gravel pit behind it now.
Yeah.
Huge gravel pit. Oh, wow. It's
Wow.
huge. Yeah, it was huge.
The barn is still there.
Mhm. And during the Second World War, they gave solace to a Japanese couple from California, Mr. and Mrs. Oda. They, do you remember Mr. Carr, the governor, at that time? He said, if the United States can do that to the Japanese, they could do it to anybody. So he gave open doors for the Japanese to come to Colorado. And so there was a lot of different farmers that let Japanese families live with them, and they farmed with them, but gave them a place to live. So we knew Mr. and Mrs. Oda. Yeah, they were sweet older couple. Yeah, I just thought of that. about the church and then about the Otis. Yeah.
Otis were the first family they sponsored,
Mhm.
and then Sugaheras were the second family, and they had, they raised their family out on the farm. And I don't ever remember hearing whether Otis had, I don't know how many,
I don't know. They were older then.
but I made the acquaintance of one of the
Mhm.
grandsons,
Mhm.
oh, probably 20 years ago. He was a member of the Historical Society. And the Japanese families gave Grandma and Grandpa gorgeous china,
Mhm.
tea sets, and there's used to be a velvet picture on the wall that came from Japan. But anyway, Sue and I think both ended up with one saucer and her teacup.
Mhm.
And after I found out that the Otis great-grandson was in the vicinity, I sent him, I never have met him. He was going to come out someday, and it's never worked.
So we both sent him our cups
So anyway, we
Yeah.
thought, well, that came
from their
from.
grandparents. Came from Japan.
And
Yeah.
what are we going to do with them? Be careful and don't break them, and
Right.
yeah.
So we thought he would like him. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Kind
sure.
of cool.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
There's all kinds of connections around, like the Winburns. Winburn is the one that made the streets in Fort Lupton and plotted the Fort Lupton. And
So, can we talk a little bit more about you two specifically and your families, like your children and your husbands, and I want to hear a little bit about that as well.
Where do you want to start? Okay, when I was in the 8th grade, this does get to my family. Grandma and Grandpa Davis, I'm not sure, I think maybe it was elk hunting. Grandpa Davis met Lester Winslow. Lester and Opal and their daughter Verlin moved
out by the river.
just the first place, Platte River going up, Sand Hill Road, I can't tell you what it is. But anyway, Verlin had this,
Street.
Becky. Becky was this lovely, she wasn't a full-size horse, and you could get on her backside, upside, inside. So anyway, Sue and Verlin and I were on Becky when,
All three of us.
yeah, and she didn't care. And I was on last, and kids, and it was not on purpose, they didn't, I don't know where they were, but on down the river somewhere, shot a shotgun, and all Becky did was jump. Well, Marlene was on the backside, and so Marlene went off and landed and broke my arm right here. Grandma Davis, every time Marlene had an accident, Grandma Davis, and it was Sunday, Grandma Davis had called Dr. Pearson. But anyway, I ended up with a cast. The only thing wrong was I could still use this hand for homework. Didn't bother it a bit. But I was in, it cut across here, and then anyway, my whole body was in this cast besides this. So back to now, where Rich comes in. I don't know how many families were included, but some of the busier families in town started a teen town
Mm-hmm.
for 7th, 8th on into high school. And it was the old chamber building, and Professor Lamont came out from Denver and taught the waltz, foxtrot, California shag. I think it was just 3. Anyway, Marlene got to go, and well, parents took turns, and I think they had to
Chaperoning.
buy pop and candy bars, and then they took turns chaperoning, and it ran beautifully. And it was over like 10:30 or something on Saturday night, every Saturday night. Well, I couldn't dance, so I was out in the kitchen when I was in the 8th grade passing out candy bars and pop. You know, what else was I going to do? And this young man felt sorry for me and came out in the kitchen and talked to me, who happened to be Rich Stieber. And I didn't date him because I wasn't old enough to date. But anyway, we were good friends, and the California shag, I don't know whether either one of you even care, but in one place you go, the gal goes between their legs, you know, and brings them back up and flips them. And then somehow or the other, and I don't remember how you did it, but anyway, flipped the lady over his back. I probably weighed, no, it wasn't twice as much, but I weighed more than Rich did. And we did good at the California shag, and I have never figured out how. But anyway, we had a really good time, and then it kind of died down. And freshman year, after, the summer after freshman, I was at, we had baseball games, and Rich and his cousin Jim Wattenberg, and a bunch of the high school kids were there. And Jim asked me to, if he could take me home one night, and Joanne Schmidt, which was one of my oldest friends, didn't really want to go with Rich because she knew Jim, but she didn't know Rich. So Rich took me home that night. And that kind of, yeah, piddled around off and on. And I went with him off and on until 1953 when we got married. He was on his way to Korea, and we got married, and he came home a year and a half. I went to California. I went to California on the train because he wasn't shipping out right away. And Mom married Bob Soretto, and he had relatives all over all over the country. Lovely, lovely Italian, friendly. I mean, there was no problem with being stepkids or anything. Anyway, he told Rich, he said, you call so-and-so and his sister that lived in California, and Anita Redding, and what time, who he was, that he was married to Marlene, and he and Jack DeRoe, one of his best friends, were coming in the middle of the night, and Anita and her husband met him and took him home with them for a couple of days. And then they had to report, I think it was Camp Pendleton. Is that right? Sounds right. Anyway, so as soon as school was out, I got on the train and went to California, and he didn't meet the train. And all Marlene knew was I gave the taxi driver the address, and he took me to Camp Pendleton, to the right building and everything. And Rich had not gotten the letter or telegram or whatever that I sent telling him that the train arrangements had changed. So anyway, all I knew was to sit there at the main drag, and I fell asleep, and he came in and found me and woke me up. So we stayed with Frink Cousins in California one night, and then we stayed with Greg and Regina Soretto the rest of the time before he shipped out. And then Mom and Bob and Sue, Ronnie and Robert and Jess were all in California. They always took off as soon as school was out. Mom was a school
Like
teacher.
Greg and Regina's.
And
Soretto.
so they went to, so anyway, Rich shipped, I stayed at Greg and Regina's most of the time. And when Bob and Mom and their entourage came out, I came home with them. And Mom and Bob had only been married year and a half, 2 years. And to have two families collide. Anyway, I lived with Aunt Nancy and Uncle Bud until about 4 months before Rich came home. Anyway, he met his daughter when she was 14 months old. And Grandma Burge babysat with Zoe, and I had an old car, and we went to Colorado Springs. He had to go out to Carson to get discharged the next day. And we thought we were big shots, and we spent the night at the Antlers Hotel. And we had to go outside and walk down the ramp to see where, we couldn't figure out where we parked the car in the underground parking. So we went out and walked in the ramp and found it. Anyway, the plans were for he and his brother Fred. Rich's folks had 5 boys and 2 girls. And the 2 oldest boys and both of their girls, no, Babs was a nurse, but Eileen was in the service, was a nurse, and four of their boys, counting Rich. Fred had had some fingers cut off when he was 14 in a farm accident, so he was exempt from the service. But anyway, plans were, when Rich came home, that Fred and Rich were going to have milk cows and join forces and farm with their dad. And I'm trying to remember, it was Uncle Fred. He was just 18 months older than Rich, and we dearly loved that guy. And we went to an auction to buy milk cows. Oh, and I have to tell you why we had money to go to the auction. Rich's mom and her dad and an aunt had moved to Marble, Colorado for his health, and he was a stonemason. And how Rich's mom ended up in Brighton, Colorado, I never did get that clear, but anyway, she had a job and worked at the Brighton Bank. And after we got married and when we were needing money to buy milk cows, Mr. Odell happened to be at the Inglewood Bank, and he remembered Mary Stieber, and we got a loan with almost no backing. And all of the milk cows died. They all had, not all at once, but we ended up paying the loan off on dead cows. They all had hardware in their stomachs. The wire had not all been taken off of bales, and they swallowed it, and it makes a mess, and they die. But anyway, I had saved enough money for some of the furniture while Rich was gone, and then I had enough money, and I bought all myself a brown Swift cow, and she was the most beautiful thing, and her babies looked like deer, and they were the cutest.
Beautiful
and
eyes.
Very good milker. But anyway, so they farmed together in 1959 and 60. The Colorado Milk Association, there's another name for it, I think, wanted us to be more modern and build the regular milk barn with the automatic everything, and there was no way. Feeding 3 families was not worth it. So Fred was an excellent mechanic and did wonders with just these 3 on one hand. He went to work in Denver, and the John Deere man, Harold Jensen, had the John Deere shop store on the corner of 4th, where that health food place is now. And he asked Rich, he knew all the boys had grown up knowing how to take care of tractors and what to do with them and everything, so he asked Rich if he would be interested in coming to work for him. And while he was working for him, the dealer in Kingsburg asked him to come over and work for him, and then they sold out, and the next one kept Rich, and Governor Romer ended up as the main owner when we were there, the last 30 years. We were part owners with Governor Romer, and I know the other side of Governor Romer, which is delightful. Okay, Zoe, as you well know, is the mayor of Fort Lupton.
Yes.
One of the Winburns was the first mayor, and the Winburn that bought a bunch of the property for the Winburn addition. So anyway, she thought it was funny, kind of ironic, I don't know what she thought, when she became mayor. Anyway, she went to school in Fort Lupton. Actually, no, not the. And then we had 4 boys. Greg, I had never enough nerve to ask why he quit school in Lupton, but he went to Kingsburg and finished junior and senior year. And I'm sure he got in trouble, but like I said, I was too chicken to find out. Nobody ever bothered to tell me, which was nice. And then Greg was born in 56, Ed was born in 58. And this was before doctors said anything if babies were overdone. Okay, Ed, and I have to back up too. I weighed a flat 11 pounds when I was born, so I can't blame it all on I don't know what. But anyway, Ed weighed 10 pounds, 10 and a half ounces, and was 23 inches long. And he wore size 3 months home from the hospital, and was always big and gentle. And then Chris came along, and he was due December 3rd, 1959. And I told the doctor all along, I said, he's coming on Christmas. Every time I'd go in, he'd say December 3rd, and I said, Doc, I told you, he's coming on Christmas. And he did, 5 o'clock Christmas afternoon. And it didn't dawn on me until too many years ago. Our Grandma Davis died Christmas afternoon about 5 o'clock. And my son was born 6 years later, about 5 o'clock on Christmas afternoon. So anyway, he weighed 10 pounds, 8.5 ounces.
I know.
Big babies.
Big babies.
And then by the time Jack was due, they were just getting to the place in 61. And I had been to the doctor, and it was past due. And the doctor said, would you like to have this baby tonight? And I said, it's fine with me. And he only weighed 813, which is exactly what Zoe weighed. So I went, well, and Greg only weighed 7'7", so the poor kid always thought he was adopted because he was darker complected, and the rest are all blondes. They all have big heads. In fact, my grandson was at the house yesterday, and his oldest son, and he was getting teased because he has so many curls that we don't know what size his head is. He all of a sudden grew 5 inches one year, and he's taller than I am, and he's 15.
Oh.
But anyway, we were talking about the Stiebers and the big heads, and then a lot of the Davis, our half-brothers, are, a couple of them are very good size. So, you know, our kids didn't have a chance. But anyway, Zoe lived in Longmont for a while, worked in Longmont, and came back to Lupton with the idea that her dad and I were going to need some help, and she's still here. Greg worked at the, I said we started at, Rich was at the John Deere store in Kingsburg with the governor, and our oldest son worked over there in the parts department until he was diagnosed with scleroderma, which I had never heard of, when he was, I think, 29 years old. And we were told that he had probably 10 years, and he had 30, which we were very thankful for. It got to the place where his fingers shrunk, his mouth started shrinking, the tissue and stuff, and then it didn't go internal till the last year. And the last week, his lungs did not function at all. And it was just, like I said, we had him a lot longer than we had thought he would. He had been married and had our only grandson, Travis, and Travis is now married and had 3 boys. And then Ed married he married a gal that was working in Fort Lupton for a couple of years, and he was working long hours, and that didn't work well with a young wife. He farmed, was gone constantly. And he and Diane got married. What year did Joe get married?
91.
Okay, they got married same year, the year before, same
Same
year.
year.
And they had no children. And Ed was huge. He should have played football, but he played basketball. They had to order his shoes and everything with Ed. He was big. And all my boys, well, actually Zoe too, all the kids have big heads, quote unquote.
Was he 6'6"? Yeah.
Thick neck. And Chris's head is as big as Ed's, if you measure it, but Ed's was round and Chris's is
longer.
Yeah. But anyway, they're all, and then Chris's arm he has to have special shirts and stuff because, anyway, most of my boys, except the oldest one, were very, very good sight. Ed was your typical outdoorsman. He worked for CDOT, retired from CDOT. He went ice fishing, he went elk hunting, he carved wood. He made a rocking moose for 2 of my great-grandkids. It's a rocking horse, only it's huge.
It's a moose.
And it's a moose. 4 years ago in October, he had a bad headache. And then he woke up one morning, which was not a good morning to wake up to, and went to the ER because something was wrong. And they did a x-ray that morning and sent him to an eye and ears and nose throat specialist immediately. And he had a cardona
Yeah, I think
tumor
that's what we said.
between, it wasn't in his brain, it was between the skin and the back of his skull. And anyway, he made it from,
October 30th.
yeah, well, he was diagnosed November 2nd, I think, till April 29th the next year. And that one was not easy. Either one of them was not easy. And Chris was not as much as a wild child as the other three boys were. We'll put it that
More
way.
serious. Yeah.
Chris
he's
was more serious. He knew when he was 3 years old he wanted to be a pilot. And then when he started growing, height-wise, he was afraid he was going to be too tall. And he graduated. He retired as a pilot for United last December because he was born on December 25th and he was 65 on December 25th and he had to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And he has since got his gliding license,
Glider.
glider, and he loves in the air. He absolutely loves in the air. He has back problems, and I'm sure part of it is for being hunched over for planes. That's where he lives, up in the air. He has his second marriage. The first marriage, he has two girls, my M&Ms, Mackenzie and Madison. Mackenzie is married and would like to get into environmental something or the other, and they live
She
in
loves bees.
Klamath Falls, Oregon. Madison is a model. Madison can do anything she sets her mind to, and she's looking for the right man, but she's got a very good job. And Jack's the youngest that got into a lot of trouble too, because everybody in town knew who he belonged to. And one night, Judy Soretto called and said, "Marlene, the police are looking for the white pickup." And I said, "Let them look, it's parked right here in the backyard." We were having a party, and I thought, ha, ha, ha. There was one time, my kids weren't, and they didn't do anything destructive. In fact, there was one night when Jack's bunch was out playing around and a haystack started on fire, and Jack was homesick. And I didn't even have nerve enough till a couple of years ago. I asked him, if you'd have been with him that night, what would you have done? And he had to stop and think about it, and he said, "Mom, I'd have put out the fire."
Yeah.
Because he had no control who set it. And it was one of his best buddies. And he said, "Mom, I'd have put it out." And he has 2 daughters, so I ended up with 1 grandson, 4 granddaughters, and now I have 2 great-granddaughters and 6 great-grandsons, which are the delight of my life. And I need to tell you something real fast about my oldest great-grandson.
Okay.
He had multiple seizures, and when it's called Deuce syndrome, when you have more than 7 or more. That is
34 a day.
Oh my.
And sometimes very lengthy. Anyway, Children's Hospital just absolutely will never, ever, ever not have my respect. They did brain surgery, and this was one of the first ones that they had done like this. But anyway, when he was little, his scar in his head is a Z. That's so it doesn't mean an open scar, and when your hair is parted, it's not parted one place. And so when he was little, he told people that the bear got him, was why they were. But anyway, he has several problems and never ceases to amaze me. He is also taller than I am, and he's about this big around. But anyway, he does leather work. His godmother's father was a leatherman, and Shelley knows what she's doing, and she has taught him. He won blue ribbons at the state fair and at the Weld County Fair with
Beautiful.
rifle scabbard. He went.
He did you a Bible. He got a
Oh,
blue
yeah.
ribbon on that.
He got grand prize at state win.
Leather cover.
The leather work with my name on it and 3 crosses. He also does very good at shooting, and my youngest son, Proud Poppy, had to tell me, because Wyatt doesn't make excuses and try to figure out what went wrong. He does it, and he does it again. He doesn't get shook in between. Well, and this doesn't sound good, but he came in 16th out of the state 2 weekends ago in Colorado Springs at the state shoot.
Oh, wow.
So now he wants to be, there's another different kind of shooting.
Oh, no.
And he cooks, he loves to cook. Started woodworking.
Yeah.
And on his birthday, he's on the 4th of July, so for a while he thought that was why there was a big party. And there is. But he made me a stamp holder, those little plastic ones that you put the roll in?
Yeah.
Well, it's 2 pieces of wood, and there's 2 inlaid stripes in it. So it's 2 different colors of wood for a row of stamps.
Really cool.
Wow.
So
I
things
never
that he
think.
can do, and he told me he didn't remember a lot of things. And I said, but and his goat won grand prize. He raises goats. The other 2 have pigs, but I figured that Wyatt could handle goats easier than pigs.
He's so proud of him.
How old is he?
16.
He's just 16.
And he passed his driver's test and he walked out and he says, well, where's my pickup? So they had to explain to him. But he keeps coming up with this stuff that we never expected. But he told me a couple of weeks ago, he walked me to the car from the fair and he says, Grandma, I don't remember some things. And he's in special needs classes, but he does
amazing.
anything.
He's amazing.
He really is, and way past what we ever figured he was going to be. But I told him, I said, there was a lot of things that I didn't think I'd ever really need. And I said, someday somebody's going to ask you to do something, and you're going to say, I know how to do that. So I'm hoping, and then I've got to talk to him again because Uncle Ed didn't like school. In fact, I threatened to go to school with him one day to keep him in school. And thank God he went. Because he was a junior.
Oh.
But I'm no good. Why should I keep going to school? But anyway, I'm going to tell Wyatt that story too because he loved Uncle Ed. Uncle Ed showed him how to make cinnamon rolls, and among other things. But he is just fascinating. You never know what he's going to come up with. But anyway, when he passed his driver's test, he walked out and didn't know where his pickup was. And so they explained to him that, this was way down the road. Sydney didn't get her car immediately. But he told me not too long ago, he says, Grandma, I'm not sure. I don't think I'm a good driver. So bless his heart.
Oh,
He's not really pushing getting a vehicle. And that makes me very, very proud of him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure enough. I'm not sure I want to drive. So
okay.
he'll work into it.
He can do a lot of other great things
Oh, he can. He can.
if driving
Yeah.
isn't for him.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Mhm.